Of course, I'm very, very pleased to greet Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, whose Firearms Investigation Unit did such an incredible job in this case. And with us is Mike Vecchionis, the Chief of the Rackets Division here, Kevin Richardson, the Executive Assistant DA in the Rackets Bureau, Josh Hanshaft, Executive Assistant DA, Rackets Division, Hilda Morgenstern, Bureau Chief, Rackets Division. And then we get down to the workers, all right? It's Greg Pinto and Teresa Rowe and John McNiff, who did an incredible job in this investigation. Working with, I mean, you're all aware of this, but there were 2 young cops from this unit murdered a number of years ago. So it's a very, very dangerous thing that they do. And while New York City remains the safest large city in America, the incidence of gun violence is still something that plagues our communities. FBI statistics indicate a large majority of the murders and manslaughter in America over the past several years involve the use of firearms. The numbers are simply staggering and demonstrate the clear need to remove illegal guns from the streets by all lawful means available. In 2011, my office, together with the Firearms Investigations Unit of the NYPD, conducted 3 separate investigations into the illegal sale of guns in Brooklyn. These investigations were recently completed, and today we can report that undercover police officers purchased a total of 154 illegal guns from 11 individuals. In the first investigation, we allege that an undercover NYPD detective bought a total of 51 guns during 29 separate transactions from David Augustine. The sales took place in the East Flatbush section of Brooklyn in broad daylight. Juice, as Augustine is known on the street, sold to the undercover detective pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, semi-automatic handguns. 26 of the weapons were loaded, and 1 was stolen from the NYPD several years ago. One of these has been used in a homicide, and the investigation into those matters is continuing, as is the investigation of how Augustine obtained the guns sold to the undercover detectives. Excuse me. We further allege that Augustine sold the undercover detective a bulletproof vest on one occasion during the investigation, and moments before Augustine made a sale to the undercover detective. Other officers observed the man, later identified as Richard James, hand Augustine a black plastic bag. That bag contained a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol that Augustine then sold to the undercover detective. A Kings County grand jury has indicted Augustine, charged him with criminal sale of a firearm in the first degree, and other charges. If convicted, he faces a maximum term of 25 years in prison. And that is the starting point of any negotiation. There will be a plea to this indictment. At this amount of time, it will be a trial. James has also been indicted for criminal sale of a firearm in the 3rd degree, and if convicted, he could be sentenced to up to 7 years in prison. In the second investigation, undercover detectives bought 87 guns, the majority of which were loaded, from Kerwin Gobin, a 25-year-old known as Trini. These sales occurred between November 2011 and September 2012. Gobin sold pistols, revolvers, assault rifles, and a fully automatic machine gun to the undercover detectives in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, where Gobin resides. Following his arrest, a search warrant was executed on his home, and 144 rounds of ammunition were recovered. Gobin brought the weapons to the sales site in black plastic bags and sometimes in duffel bags. A fully automatic Sten machine gun with a 25-bullet magazine was among the guns sold by Gobin. That's this thing right here. A single pull of the trigger, and this weapon fires 550 rounds per minute. You can imagine what the cops are up against with that thing on the street. Our investigation revealed that Gobin obtained guns from multiple locations, including places outside of New York State. On one occasion, he obtained a gun that had been stolen from a Pennsylvania state trooper when the trooper's home was burglarized earlier this year. The Kings County grand jury has indicted Gobin, charging him with criminal sale of a firearm in the first degree, among other charges, and if convicted, he faces a maximum of 25 years in state prison. 6 other individuals who supplied guns to Gobin have also been indicted. They are Hassan Pasha, Yolanda Samuel, Stuart Hamilton, Trevane Hilaire, Claude Laguerre, and Chris Salacran. If convicted, they could be sentenced to prison terms of between 7 and 15 years. A 7th individual, Kenneth Marshall, has been indicted for possessing stun guns that he supplied to Gobin, who in turn sold them to the undercover detective. Marshall has been charged and faces, upon conviction, up to 1 year in prison. The 3rd investigation involves the purchase of guns from a person named Henke Martinez, who resides in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn. An undercover detective purchased 16 guns from Martinez between August 2011 and 2012. Martinez, obviously unaware of the true identity of the undercover detective, called or sent him text messages when he had guns to sell. The undercover would drive to meet Henke, and the sales occurred inside the detective's car. 12 of the 16 guns were sold with ammunition. Among the guns sold were semi-automatic pistols and other handguns. And the Kings County grand jury has indicted Martinez for criminal sale of a firearm in the first degree, and if convicted, he faces a maximum of 25 years in prison. The dangers that illegal guns pose on our streets simply cannot be overstated. But sadly, we are all too familiar with instances where innocent people and even children are injured or killed when criminals fire their guns in our city. I will continue to commit this office to work with Police Commissioner Kelly and his Firearms Investigations Unit of the NYPD to vigorously investigate and prosecute all people involved in the illegal sale of firearms. And we will seek the maximum penalty for those found guilty. Make no mistake about it, these cases will go to trial or there'll be a plea to the indictment. Commissioner Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yesterday, a park on Roosevelt Island was dedicated to President Roosevelt's 4 freedoms. President Roosevelt believed that the freedom from fear should be an aspiration for everyone, regardless of where they lived in the world, and that really is what law enforcement officers dedicate themselves to every day. But people who live in low-income neighborhoods, people who live in public housing should enjoy a measure of that freedom from fear. And those are the type of things, the type of freedom that so many of us just take for granted. And that's why we in the New York City Police Department engaged in proactive policing. That's why we collaborate so closely with DA Hynes and all of his prosecutors, a terrific staff, to take guns off the street. Last week, and many of you were there, we announced the arrest of over a dozen people in East Harlem, where 129 guns were recovered over a year-and-a-half period of time. Here you see 150 guns. It just goes to show you the amount of guns that are out there on the street. These guns were taken from Bushwick, from Flatbush, from Crown Heights. But in taking these guns off the street, police officers, as Joe said, put themselves at tremendous risk. This is the most dangerous work in all of law enforcement. And DA referred to police officers, to detectives who were assassinated, who were killed in such a cold-blooded fashion. Detective Rodney Andrews and Detective James Nimrin, working precisely doing this, recovering guns from people willing to sell them, young people willing to sell these guns. And that's why the men and women of the New York City Police Department District Attorney's Office focus so much attention on this issue, in spite of the fact that there is no national will to cut off the pipeline that brings guns, that pours guns into our city. They're trying to give a measure of freedom from fear to neighborhoods like Bushwick that enjoyed and take it for granted, as I say, in places such as, we'll say, Brooklyn Heights. Now, the vast majority of the victims of these guns are young people, mostly young men of color. And their assailants are young men of color. I want to give you just some numbers here. The average age of the sellers, in this case, was 21 and a half years of age. The average price of the gun was $1,100. Brokers delivered up to 5 sales per week, sometimes selling as many as 7 guns at a time. We know that at least 3 9mm guns sold in these operations were used previously in shootings in Brooklyn. All of the victims were in their 20s, with one exception. It was a 35-year-old man who was shot in a car in Canarsie and later died as a result of his wounds. Trace evidence shows the same gun was used again in Canarsie 2 months later, when a 24-year-old was shot in the leg during a dispute. Another gun was traced to a shooting in East Flatbush last December, in which a 24-year-old was struck in the neck. A young man was shot multiple times on a sidewalk in Crown Heights. Another was shot multiple times in a liquor store in Flatbush. The victims who survived could not or would not identify suspects of any of these shootings. This January, 16-year-old Malik Downer was arrested for shooting a 20-year-old male on Flatbush Avenue. The weapon was a high-capacity 9mm pistol known as CZ, meaning it was made in the Czech Republic. It was reported stolen from cargo at Kennedy Airport in 2007. After his arrest, Downer placed a phone call to an individual known as Rich. That Rich is Richard James, one of the suspects charged as a supplier to David Augustine, who District Attorney Hynes named earlier. The CZ 9mm was sold to our undercover 1 week later. The seller was Augustine. In the 70th and the 71st precinct, where most of these gun buys were conducted, shootings are down by double digits, 63% and 38% respectively. This is due in no small part to the targeted undercover buys like those that have been described today. And of course, to street enforcement, that includes police stops, and to community participation in our gun buyback program with the district attorneys. As DA Hynes said, investigations into the gun origins are continuing. Some of the guns are defaced, some were reported stolen, some were reported stolen out of state, some can be traced to straw purchases. And of course, that process now is going to go forward full bore. Thanks to police and prosecutors, all of them are out of street circulation. I want to commend the members of the NYPD Firearms Investigation Unit whose work led to these arrests. They do outstanding work day in and day out and put themselves at great risk. They are Captain Raymond Festino. This is Captain Festino. We have Lieutenant Michael Jennings. We have Sergeant Donald Morgan. We have Sergeant William Sommer. Our case detective is Rohan Thompson. We have case detective Linwood Pleasant and case detective Christopher Shaughnessy. Now, many of these investigators work closely with Detective Rodney Andrews and James Nimrin, who, as I say, were executed in 2003 in Staten Island. Now, I especially, of course, want to commend the undercover officers who obviously we can't identify for their heroic, dangerous, difficult, demanding work. Their colleagues continue to perform work bravely in service to the city every day so that residents can live free of fear. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Any questions? Maybe you're as shocked as we are. Yeah. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
What happens to the guns now?
The guns are obviously, some may be involved in criminal proceedings, but ultimately all the guns that we get, assuming a criminal case is terminated, just as in our gun buyback program, will be melted down and made into coat hangers.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Commissioner?